What's up, everyone? This is the Next Tape Podcast, episode 126 with Mikel and
Tanyka,
where we have conversations on different topics. So we're going to go back to a year where, we had afros,
a decade.
long pants, and, nice little, long cars, and, where women were able to have bank accounts. What else am I missing? Tanika?
Well, I mean, all the things that he's painting sounds great, and it is great, but that's not what we're talking about. We're
yeah,
not
that's not what we're
talking
talking.
about good
Yeah,
things, unfortunately, and we're talking about the 70s, and we're
yeah.
talking about what in Jesus Christ was happening in the 70s, especially in the States, especially California. Y'all, it's amazing that
Mm.
anyone made it out alive in California during the 70s. My God.
Mm.
Like,
Interesting.
we're talking about serial killers in particular in the 70s because there was a lot of them. A lot of
Interesting.
them. California
Huh.
alone had a lot. And there's some that we don't even know about. Let's be real.
Yeah.
I just recently learned about a serial killer who was doing his at the same time as Ed Kemper, and I've never
Really?
heard of him
Huh.
because Ed
Interesting.
Kemper took over everything at that time, right?
Uh-huh.
Um, I think we're going to very briefly talk about Ed Kemper. I can't remember if I actually go deep on Ed Kemper, but anyways,
Mm-hmm.
um, again, if you don't know who Ed Kemper is, you probably
Mm-hmm.
potentially could have seen him in Mindhunter. He's a really tall boy. Um, so
Yeah.
we're going to be talking
Yeah.
about some of these people.
Mm.
And
So
yeah.
violent stuff,
Hmm?
violent stuff that
We're going to
happened
be
in the
talking some
70s.
violent stuff, unfortunately.
Mm.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Um, and
Okay.
stay tuned for our Netflix episode later on this month. I'm going to be talking about another serial killer from the 70s.
Mm.
They did a documentary on the Son of Sam. But
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Okay. All right.
Anyways, let's get into it, y'all. All right. So
Mm-hmm.
America saw a spat of headline capturing serial killers beginning in the 1970s. So the captures of like Edmund Kemper and the Son of Sam early in the decade were followed by the falls of Ted Bundy, who we've talked about in an earlier episode,
Mm-hmm.
John Wayne Gacy, and the Night Stalker. Technically, the Night Stalker is in the 80s.
Did he talk about
Um,
John Wayne Casey? I could have sworn I
I
could have
don't
heard.
think I have touched on John Wayne Gacy,
I think
but
he said his name on
I
our
think I
episode.
will one day. Because I think it's important to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
But John Wayne Gacy for me is one that I'm just like, I just I don't understand how this man went on for as long as he did.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'll never understand it. But anyways,
Mm-hmm.
um, I will be talking about some of the people on this that I just mentioned here, but
Right.
um, so yeah, like I mentioned, the Night Stalker, he was more in the 1980s,
Mm-hmm.
but he was mixed in the dramas that was going on, especially because he was in California as well.
Right. Right.
Um, but by the 90s, you were more likely to find a mass murderer at the
Mm-hmm.
cinema than
Mm-hmm.
on the evening news. So that was kind of more what we were seeing in the 90s, but this then the 70s was very different. So
Mm-hmm.
as the FBI notes, quote, there is no single identifiable cause or factor that leads to the development of a serial killer. But that hasn't stopped sociologists, criminologists, and true crime junkies of all stripes from speculating why the 1970s seemed to have so many serial killers compared to the decades before and after.
Mm-hmm.
So, who qualifies as a serial killer? So, before digging into why serial killers have free reign in the 70s, it's important to understand who exactly they are. So, defining what makes a serial killer is a more nuanced conversation than you might think. As
Right.
part of the conversation at a 2005 FBI symposium on serial murder, precisely because multiple definitions exist and vary in manners such as the number of murders involved, the types of motivation, and the temporal aspects of the murder. So, usually, if I am correct, you are classified as serial killer if you've done like three murders, but not like, because again, it can get very similar to mass or spree,
Hmm.
but
Hmm.
it's like you do a killing, you have a cooling off period, you kill again, and cooling off period, so whether the cooling off period is like a week or two or even a few days, that's the difference between like a spree or a mass murderer, where a mass murderer is all happening in one um situation, like Columbine,
Hmm.
or a spree could be in one day, but it's two different locations. And it could be multiple or one or two or whatever. That's the little bit of the difference. Um,
Hmm.
which again, we've talked about this before, failure
Right.
murder. The definition the symposium ultimately settled on was the unlawful killing of two or more victims by the same offenders in separate events. That might seem fairly broad, but that's because it needs to be. As the symposium established, there is no generic profile of a serial murderer. There are, of course, commonalities that connect a large swath of serial killers.
Hmm.
The symposium outlined that some serial murderers share personality traits such as sensation seeking, a lack of remorse or guilt, impulsivity, the need for control, and predatory behavior. Experts also noted the majority of serial killers are male, pointing to data that just 5 to 11% of known murderers are women. Like Eileen Wuornos, for example, would be considered that,
Hmm.
but
Hmm.
that was more in the 90s. The question of why there's such a gender disparity has no agreed upon answer. One possible explanation for the mostly men who grew up to become America's most infamous serial killers might be the men who came from fighting in Europe to raise them and those who didn't come home at all. Investigative historian Peter Vronsky posits in his book, which is called, it's a long title, y'all, Sons of Cain, A History of Serial Killers from the Stone Age to the Present.
Hmm.
That's the name of the book. That the
Right.
glut of psychologically damaged men who killed
Hmm.
innocent citizens could
Hmm.
have been impacted by their fathers being sociologically damaged by the killing they had to do during World War II.
Hmm.
Um, During that global conflict, soldiers witnessed new and horrific forms of carnage and cruelty. The post-war America of the 1950s, when these men would have been acting as parents, didn't offer them many outlets to properly grapple with the mental toll these
Hmm.
horrors took on them. Um, whether through abuse, neglect, or misguided attempts at making their son a man, quote unquote, these World War II veterans passed residual trauma onto their children, which might have twisted them into killers.
Hmm.
That's, I'm sure, one thing. There are many
Hmm.
different factors, though.
Hmm. Hmm.
Environmental factors could also be to blame. It might seem outlandish, but it's entirely possible that the switch to unleaded, I should say, sorry, gasoline, which began in the 1970s and was completed in 1996, could have had a massive impact on the reduction of not just murders, but all crimes within the United States. So that's interesting. Never heard that before. Crime of virtually all kinds statistically decreased starting in the 1990s, and proponents of what is called the lead crime hypothesis note that this correlates with the removal of lead from things like gasoline and paint. Many studies suggest lead exposure can have negative impacts on a child's developing brain. We have talked about lead ad nauseum on this podcast, actually. The lead crime theory posits that the problems children acquired from the exposure turns some into serial killers. Sure.
Hmm.
It's tricky to confirm given other environmental factors like poverty coinciding with many incidents of lead exposure. However, a recent paper from Jennifer Doliak, who is an expert in the economics of crime, pulls
Mhm.
together a number of studies which have attempted to hone in on the lead crime hypothesis. Her comprehensive analysis makes the case stronger. A hot button hypothesis from scholars Stephen Levitt and John Donahue, made popular by the best-selling book Freakonomics, instead connects the reduction in crime in the 1990s with the expansion of abortion access in the United States in the aftermath of Roe versus Wade. Let's not talk about it.
Mm.
Um, if that is true,
Mhm.
it would be interesting to see what could happen in the next 20 to 30 years
Right.
if Roe versus Wade is not, put back into place.
Mhm.
Hopefully one day that will happen and
Mhm.
soon. But it would be interesting to see if
Is it is
potentially
it
that could increase again.
is that a different law? Is laws different in Canada and America in terms of that one, or is it just same
Yeah,
as
our laws with abortion would have been put in place by a different case. It would have been Roe versus Wade. Roe
okay,
versus Wade is an American case.
American thing? Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that set the precedent there. Yeah.
Okay. Right. Okay.
It posits that the reduction in unwanted children, meaning kids
Mhm.
born to parents who didn't plan for or want a child, reduced the number of children raised in situations that could influence their future criminal behavior, which I think makes 100% sense to me.
Mhm.
Because when you're dealing with children who were potentially raised in broken homes, and when I mean broken homes, I mean parents who just weren't really parents, that is another reason why someone becomes a serial killer, like Ed Kemper, for example.
Mhm.
Um, he had a horrible relationship with his mother.
Mhm.
More on that later.
Mhm.
We'll get to it. Um, so this association caused controversy as it seemed to some readers to echo the idea of eugenics posits at the turn of the American century by figures like birth control activist Margaret Sanger. In 2019, Levitt and Donahue revisited the study in NPR's Freakonomics Radio, while distancing, um, where was I? Uh, okay, yeah, I cut that rest of that part out. Okay. Although not tied directly to the 1970s nor serial killers, criminologist Robert Agnew's general strain theory identifies what causes crime in the first place. He posits, quote, strains or stressors increase the likelihood of negative emotions like anger and frustration. These emotions create pressure for corrective action and crime in one possible response. Strains can be economic or social, such as relationships in which others are not treating the individual as he or she would like to be treated. In either case, the strain represents a loss of control and a drive to survive amidst turmoil.
Mhm.
Um, the 1970s were a time of great social upheaval on racial and gender grounds,
Mhm.
paired with the recession and inflation that led President Gerald Ford to say, quote, the state of the union is not good. You have a recipe for the disaffected who lack the societal status they're supposedly owed to lash out. Now, again, some of that could be narcissism,
Mhm.
but because a lot of these serial killers that we'll be talking about or we've talked about before are, so
Mhm.
the societal shifts of the 1970s might have contributed to the rise of serial killers in a different way. In 1979, criminologists Lawrence E. Cohen and Marcus Filson proposed the routine activity approach that suggests simple structural changes in society's routine activities can influence crime rates by affecting the convergence in space and time of the three minimal elements of direct contact predatory violations. So that's motivated offenders, suitable targets, and the absence of capable guardians against a violation.
Mhm.
Um, so, so we can see evidence of this in serial
Mhm.
killer from a different era. So, like
Mhm.
H. Holmes.
Mhm.
Stay tuned. I will be talking about him. Inside his infamous Chicago murder house, he preyed upon young unmarried women who had come to the quote unquote white city to pursue financial independence in ways never before offered to them.
Mm.
So again, that may not make sense to like Mikel, for example. Obviously, for my true crime junkies, you
Yeah.
get it. But we will be talking about H. Holmes in a future episode. Um,
Mm.
so as Northeastern Global News paraphrased a comment from criminologist James Allen Fox, with widespread social and cultural changes in the 60s and 70s, drug use, hitchhiking, the hippie movement, anti-establishment sentiment, conditions were prime for predators to go on the prowl. And was it ever? Um, so investigative conditions also favored the array of serial killers in the 1970s and 80s. The offenders certainly had a head start, criminologist Michael Arntfield told the BBC, stressing that the police at the time were out of their depth. No,
Mhm.
he notes that prior to the early 1980s, law enforcement simply wasn't compiling data in a way to even identify the patterns of a serial killing. Take, for example, the case of Rodney Alcala, another one that we'll be talking about in a future episode, but
Mhm.
I did talk about him in a Netflix episode that we did because of a
Mm.
movie I watched.
Mm.
He was convicted in 1980 of 7 murders, but was possibly responsible for many more, 100%. In 1978, Alcala applied to appear on the popular television program The Dating Game,
Mhm.
despite his criminal record that included being a registered sex offender. Explain yourself. As the biography has previously reported, there was no national crime database, and the technology needed for complete background um, checks on contestants didn't exist. Because of this, Alcala actually made it all the way onto the show. And not only that, because they left this part out, he won. And he potentially would have been on a date
Mhm.
alone with the woman that he was talking to on that show. Um, and he could have potentially killed her
Mhm.
eventually if he got the
Mhm.
chance.
Mm.
Um, only reason he didn't is because she literally went back to them and said, he's a creep. Something's off.
Mm.
So
Interesting. Mm.
it's possible the seemingly sudden burst of serial killers in the 1970s was more because the police and the media had suddenly started to take notice. Who knows how many unsolved murderers that I've just mentioned, murders of previous decades, were at the hands of a single serial killer, but no one ever noticed a pattern. The ability to recognize these patterns now and even create profiles of possible killers, as it was popularized by the Netflix show Mindhunter, Please Come Back, could also have contributed to why America saw far fewer
Mhm.
prolific serial killers in the final years of the 20th century. The theory goes that we could also have contributed to why America saw far fewer prolific serial killers in the
Mhm.
final years of the 20th century. The theory goes that we simply got better at catching killers early on.
Oh.
Um, So, what else am I going to talk about here? If we go to the quote unquote fun stuff. Um, okay, so modern technology has also played a role, given that everyone leaves behind a greater digital footprint than they realize. Consider, for example, the BTK killer, aka Dennis Rader, that was
Mhm.
ultimately undone in 2005. He was a 70s serial killer, by the way.
Mm.
He was undone by a floppy disk. Mikhail, have I ever told you the story? I probably have not told you this.
I haven't told us, but I know about floppy disk though. I
Well,
know
we know
about
about floppy
them.
disks. Well, check this out. I'm not going to go into his crimes necessarily here.
Mhm. Mhm.
I don't know if I ever will because I hate him. But I
Mhm.
mean, I hate all these idiots. But anyways,
Mhm.
BTK, he went all through the 70s. If you watched Mindhunt, did you watch Mindhunter at
No, I
all?
never watched it.
No,
No.
no. You need to watch Mindhunter because BTK, they do show him in Mindhunter, but he was never
Mhm.
caught in the 70s. Um,
Mm.
but he killed throughout the 70s, I think also into the 80s, but then he didn't kill for like 20 years after that. Like
Mhm.
he was
Mhm.
blind dormant. Um, and then he kind of, I guess, maybe felt like he wanted to start again. And at this point, it was in the early aughts, and he contacts the police
Mm,
This guy, he contacts the police. At this point, he was like working within his church, and because he used to actually work as a alarm system,
mhm,
which was his way in to some of his victims because he was working with the alarm company. Anyway,
mm,
so he was working at the church at this point. He contacts the police and he's like, "Hey guys, quick question for you. And
mhm,
you're gonna tell me the
mhm,
truth though, right? You're gonna tell me the truth.
mhm,
Can you trace me from a floppy disk?" The police are like, "Oh no, 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 we can't do that. No." She lied to him. Obviously they could. And they were able
Wow,
to figure out that it was him and they arrested him like an idiot.
floppy disk. Mm,
Yeah.
oh,
If he
interesting.
just shut the up and didn't say anything, he wouldn't be in prison right now. But he's right where he belongs.
Mhm,
Piece of shit. Anyway,
mhm.
sorry. Can you tell I'm mad?
Yeah, yeah.
He killed a child, so I don't care. Um, and would have killed other children if he had the opportunity. Anyway, let's move on to the next one. How about the Golden State Killer, who was finally caught in 2018 after a family member had done an online DNA genealogy analysis?
Interesting. Mm,
Hmm. That jackass is also in prison. Our loss of anonymity in the digital age, in theory,
mhm,
makes it far harder for serial killers to operate unnoticed. So, whether constant digital surveillance keeps serial killers at bay is a comforting thought, is debatable, since constant digital surveillance in and of itself presents problems, but it's more
mhm, mhm,
comforting than the final major theory that the decline in known serial killers from the 1970s isn't because we've gotten better at catching killers, but actually because we've gotten far worse. So, the Murder Accountability Project offers a chart which depicts the homicide clearance rates, meaning the number of murders solved in the United States from 1965 to 2023. So, in 1965, the clearance rate was 91%, leaving only 9% of murders unsolved. That's incredible. Jump
mhm,
ahead to 1983, and while the estimated homicides total had more than doubled from that of 1965, the
mhm,
clearance percentage decreased to 76%. Not great, but not
mhm.
bad. So let's jump ahead
Yeah.
again to the most recent data from 2023, and the statistics look more troubling. The nonprofit tallied roughly 1,000 fewer estimated homicides compared to 40 years ago, yet the clearance rate was down to just 57.8%. Don't
Mhm,
like those odds. Worse yet, that stat is actually an improvement on 2022, which had an all-time low for clearance rate at 52.3%. So in other words, it's possible that the reason we aren't seeing as many serial killers in the newspapers as or online as we
mhm,
did in the 1970s isn't because there aren't as many out there. It's simply just we don't see them because they're not being caught.
mhm, mhm,
So we've talked about that part. Let's go into the fun stuff, quote unquote,
mhm. Yeah.
and talk about some of the serial killers that graced us with their presence. No one acts, but anyways, from the 1970s.
Mhm,
So Edmund Kemper, who was one of the people I mentioned in the beginning, at 15 years old, okay, 15, killed both his grandparents to see what it felt like. Upon release, because he did go to prison, juvie, but he did go to prison,
mhm,
he drifted, picking up and releasing female hitchhikers, but as he soon stopped letting them go, killing 6 young women in the Santa Cruz, California area in the 1970s. In 1973, he killed his mother and her friend before turning himself in.
mhm,
So let's dig a little deeper on all that. That's what we got for you coming up. Kemper was born on December 18th, 1948. Jesus Christ, he's a Sagittarius. In
mhm,
Burbank, California, the middle child of E. and Clarnell Kemper. After his parents divorced in 1957, he moved with his mother and 2 sisters to Montana. Kemper had a difficult relationship with his alcoholic mother, as she was very critical of him, and he blamed her for all of his problems. When he was 10 years old, she forced him to live in the basement, away from his sisters, whom she feared he might harm in some way. Let's just say he was a weird kid. And here's why. Signs of trouble began to emerge early. Kemper had a dark fantasy life, sometimes dreaming about killing his mother. Yikes. He cut off the heads of his sister's dolls and even coerced the girls into playing a game he called Gas Chamber, in which he had them blindfold him and lead him to a chair where he pretended to writhe in agony until he quote unquote died. His first victims were the family cats. Uh, So that's one thing, because again, if anyone knows about the trifecta, there is harm to animals, peeing in bed, or having an accident in bed, and what's the other one? Um, there's another one I can't remember, but he has one of the trifectas already. So here we go. At 10, he buried one of them alive, the cat, and the second 13-year-old Kemper slaughtered with a knife. He went to live with his father for a time, but ended up back with his mother because I guess his dad's like, that who just decided to send the troubled teenager to live with his parental grandparents in North Fork, California. Okay, guys, buckle up. Trigger warning. This isn't going to be good. This whole episode's a trigger warning. Anyways,
Yeah, it is.
Kemper hated living on his grandparents' farm. Before going to North Fork, he already begun learning about firearms, but his grandparents took away his rifle after he killed several birds and other small animals. On August 27th, 1964, Kemper finally turned his building rage on his grandparents. The 15, I gotta keep saying that, year old shot his grandmother in the kitchen after an argument, and I hate this so much. And when his grandfather returned home, Kemper went outside and shot him by his car and then hid the body. You're about to find out why he killed his grandfather in a hot second. Afterward, he called his mother, who told him to call the police and tell them what happened. Later, Kemper would say that he shot his grandmother, quote, to see what it felt like. But then he added that he had killed his grandfather so that the man wouldn't have to find out that his wife had been murdered. For his crimes, Kemper was handed over to the California Youth Authority. He underwent a variety of tests, which determined that he had a very high IQ. Listen, y'all, Ed Kemper is a smart human being, like really smart.
Yeah. Yeah.
But also, he suffered from paranoid schizophrenia. Kemper was eventually sent to Atascadero State Hospital, which is a maximum security facility for mentally ill convicts. In 1969, Kemper was released at the age of 21, despite his prison doctor's recommendation that he does not live with his mother because of her past abuse and psychological issues involving her. He nonetheless rejoined her in Santa Cruz, California, where she had moved after ending her third marriage to take a job with the University of California. That was probably a bad idea. While there, Kemper attended community college for a time and worked a variety of jobs, eventually finding employment with the Department of Transportation in 1971. Kemper had applied to become a state trooper, but he was rejected because of his size. He's a big boy, y'all. He weighed around 300 pounds and was a whopping 6 feet 9 inches tall. Tall. They nicknamed him, Mikel, let's see if you pick up on this one. They nicknamed him Big Ed. Big Ed from 90 Day Fiancé.
Yeah.
His nickname is after freaking serial killer. Let that sink in. Anyways, however, he did hang around some of the Santa Cruz police officers. One gave him a training school badge and handcuffs, while another let him borrow a gun, according to Whoever Fights Monsters by Robert K. Ressler. Ever heard of him? And then Tom Schatchman, who I've never heard of. Kemper even had a car that resembled a police cruiser. So he's just all in this right now.
Mm.
The same year he began working for the highway department, Kemper was hit by a car while out on his motorcycle. His
Mhm.
arm was badly injured, and he received a $15,000 settlement in the civil suit he filed against the car's driver. Unable to work now, Kemper turned his mind toward other pursuits. He noticed a large number of young women who
Mm.
liked to hitchhike in the area. In the new car he bought with some of his settlement money, Kemper began storing the tools he thought he might need to fulfill his murderous desires, including a gun, a knife, and handcuffs. So from there, we're about to enter into the co-ed killer, which is his serial killer name, co-ed killer. He's one of many co-ed killers. Anyways, so
Mm.
Kemper would pick up female hitchhikers and let them go. However, when he offered a ride to two Fresno State students, Mary Ann Picey, I think is how you say her name, and Anita
Mhm. Mhm.
Luchessa,
Mhm. Mhm.
they would never make it to the destination, nor would he let them
Mm.
go. Their families reported them missing soon thereafter, but nothing would be known of their fates until August 15th, when a female head was discovered in the woods near Santa Cruz and was later identified as Pisces or Pisces.
Mm.
Luchessa's remains, however, were never found. Kemper would later explain that he stabbed and strangled Pessy or Pessy. Sorry, I'm sorry, I should have her name right.
Mhm. Mhm.
Before stabbing Luchessa as well. After the murders, he brought the bodies back to his apartment and removed their heads and hands. You're going to notice that is a trend of his.
Mhm. Mhm.
Kemper also reportedly engaged in sexual activity with their corpses. Um,
Wow.
yeah, I know what. I'm not going to say which part. I'm going to leave it at that. But if
Mm.
people who know this story, you know, you know. Anyway, later that year, on September 14th, 1972, Kemper picked up a 15-year-old, Aiko Ko,
Mm.
who had decided to hitchhike rather than wait for the bus to take her to a dance class. She would meet the same fate as the other two victims. In January 1973, Kemper continued to act on his murderous impulses, picking up hitchhiker Cindy Shaw, whom he shot and killed. While his mother was
Mhm.
out, Kemper went to her home and hid Shaw's body in his room. He would dismember her corpse there the following day and threw the parts into the ocean. Several parts were
Mm.
later discovered when they washed up ashore. He buried her head in his mother's backyard.
Wow.
He liked to keep the heads of his victims.
Mm.
On February 5th, 1973, Kemper used a campus parking sticker his mother had given him to facilitate a double murder because she worked at the university, if you remember, so that's
Mm.
where he would have gone it. He drove to the university where he offered a ride to two students, Rosalind Thorpe and Alice Liu. Shortly after
Mhm.
picking them up, he shot the two young women, then drove past the campus security at the gates with the two mortally wounded women in the car. So let me make sure everyone's following here. He killed them inside the grounds and left with them, passing security with their dead bodies in the car.
Mm.
Um, After the murders, Kemper again decapitated his two victims and further dismembered the bodies, removed the bullets from their heads, and disposed of their parts in different locations. In March, some of Thorpe's and Lou's remains were discovered by hikers near Highway 1 in San Mateo County. At the time of Kemper's murders, two other serial killers who I've mentioned before, there were other serial killers at this particular time, John Linley Fraser and Herbert Mullins. Herbert Mullins is the one I was talking about. Morbid did an episode on him. You can go listen to it.
Mm.
Um, they were also perpetrating their own crimes in the area, resulting in Santa Cruz receiving just um, the ignominious nickname, the murder capital of the world. Yeah.
Mm.
In the press, for Kemper's part, he was dubbed the co-ed killer and the co-ed butcher. All right, y'all. Now we're headed into his mother's murder. This is brutal.
Right.
This whole episode is brutal. But anyways, you get it. In April 1973, Kemper committed what would be his last two murders. On Good Friday, he went to his mother's home, where the two had an unpleasant exchange. Kemper attacked his mother after she went to sleep, first striking her on the head with a hammer and then cutting her throat with a knife. As he had with his other victims, he then decapitated her and cut off her hands, but then also removed her larynx and put it down the garbage disposal.
Wow.
Uh-huh. Um, I probably should leave this part out, but it's not mentioned here, so I do need to
Mm,
mention this because
mhm,
this also just shows his depravity. He would sexually assault his mother's head after death.
mm.
He's
Yeah.
it's
For
about to get
him,
worse.
for him to do that, it's crazy.
Hmm. But again, it's not about sex. It's about
Mhm,
control. So
mm,
that's if that helps you get through it a little bit more. It's about control for him, right? That's why he most likely did that. But yeah, it's about to get just 10 times worse because I
mm,
will never understand why he did this next thing. After hiding his mother's parts, Kemper called his mother's friend Sally Hallett and invited her over to the house. Kemper strangled her shortly after she arrived and hid her body in a closet. Like he didn't have to do that, but he did.
mm.
I'll never understand why he did that. I mean, he didn't have to do any of
Right,
this,
right.
but it's not like his mom, who he had this fight with, and he felt like, this is what he needs to do now. I don't know. But her friend wasn't there. I will never understand why he did that.
Mm,
Um, Kemper then fled the area the next day, driving east until he reached uh, Pablo, Colorado, where on April 23rd, he made a call to the Santa Cruz police to confess his crimes. At
mm,
first, they did not believe that the guy they know as Big Ed was a killer, but during subsequent interrogations, he would lead them to all the evidence they needed to prove that he was, in fact, the infamous co-ed killer. So, charged with 8 counts of first-degree murder, Kemper went on trial for his crimes in October 1973. He was found guilty of all of the charges in early November. When asked by the judge what he thought his punishment should be, Kemper said
mm.
that he should be tortured to death.
True.
Okay, bring on the torturer. However, he instead received 8 concurrent life sentences. At present, Kemper is serving his time at California Medical Facility in Vacaville. And y'all, just a thought here.
Mhm,
If you by any chance potentially could read or have audiobooks like Star Wars audiobooks,
mhm,
just know the person who could potentially be reading that book to your child, because he does do also like children's books,
mhm.
is Edward Kemper.
Oh, okay, I see.
Mm-hmm.
Mm,
Or Edmund Kemper, should say, sorry. Um, yeah. Why say sorry? Who gives a shit if I say his name wrong? But
mm,
yeah. Ed Kemper could potentially be doing your children's audiobooks.
mm.
'Cause apparently he has such a nice voice. Ugh. Moving
Yeah,
on.
yeah.
Apparently I forgot that I did include this serial killer, but we're talking about David Berkowitz. If you know who David Berkowitz is, that is Son of Sam.
No,
He
I don't
was,
know. This.
well, there's also a documentary on him on Netflix. You should watch it.
Okay.
But he is from New York, so we're coming out of California for a second and we're going into New York.
Mhm,
So David Berkowitz, who was born on June 1st, 1953 in Brooklyn, is an American serial killer who murdered 6 people in New York City in 1976 to 77. His crimes plunged the city into panic and unleashed one of the largest manhunts in New York history. Berkowitz was a difficult and occasionally violent child. His erratic, occasionally, apparently a lot. Okay, anyways, his erratic behavior, which began after the death of his adoptive mother in 1967, intensified when his adoptive father remarried in 1971 and moved to Florida without him. That year, Berkowitz joined the army and he became an excellent marksman before he left the service in 1974. According to Berkowitz's diary, he set some 1,500 fires in New York City in the mid 1970s. Claiming he was driven by demons, Berkowitz attempted to murder a woman in December of 1975, but she survived several stab wounds. He then fatally shot a woman in July of 1976, and over the next year, he attacked several couples, claiming five more victims.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
and there's also surviving victims as well.
So
During his
are all them couples or just like single and
There were a few people who were coupled. Sometimes one person would be murdered, the other would be fatally wounded. There was one instance where it was two friends at the front of one of their homes, and he shot
Mhm.
them while they were like just talking there, like standing and talking
Yeah.
at the front of the house. So there's also single people who were killed. There's no rhyme or reason to what he was doing. It wasn't like the Zodiac killer where he usually targeted couples. It wasn't like
Mhm.
that. He would just target what he could
Mhm.
when he could. Um, so during his killing spree, he sent letters to New York newspapers signing them Son of Sam, which was a reference to a demon he believed lived inside the black Labrador retriever owned by his neighbor, Sam Carr. However, Berkowitz later admitted that his claims about a demon were made up. No. Berkowitz was arrested on August 10th, 1977, 11 days after his last murder. His capture was the result of careful police work, which involved sorting through a confusing maze of reports of suspicious persons. Ultimately, Berkowitz was identified as the most likely suspect, a theory that was confirmed when his car was found to have received a parking ticket near the scene of one of the shootings, his last shooting. Berkowitz soon confessed, and on May 8th, 1978, he pleaded guilty. In June, he was sentenced to 365 years in prison, rotten hell. He became eligible for parole in 2002, but was repeatedly denied release.
Mhm.
Yeah, I would say. Um, the fur surrounding the case was depicted in the film Summer of Sam, which was a 1999 movie.
Mhm.
So, Mikkel, there was a particular person who asked whether or not I was covering him or I've talked about him.
Mhm.
Turns out I'm talking about him now. Here we go, y'all. We're talking about John
Yes.
Wayne Gacy, who was born on March 17th, 1942 in Chicago, Illinois, and died on May 10th, 1994 in Statesville, Illinois, and was an American serial killer whose murders of 33 boys and young men in the 1970s received international media attention and shocked his suburban Chicago community, where he was known for his sociability and his performance as a clown at charitable events and children's parties.
Mhm.
Gacy was born into a blue-collar family and seems to have had a fairly ordinary childhood, but he exhibited a growing tendency toward sadism, which resulted in several encounters with the law in the 1960s.
Mhm.
In 1968, after his conviction of sexually assaulting a teenage boy, he was confined in the Iowa State Men's Reformatory, which is the Anamosa State Penitentiary, and forced to undergo psychological evaluation. After his release in 1970, and while still on parole, he was again arrested for sexual assault. Like, how many times does this man have to do this before you just leave him in jail?
Oh.
Could have saved 33 people's lives. Anyways, the charges, check this, was later dropped. Gacy then became a fairly successful independent contractor and bought a house in the suburban Chicago area. In 1978, after one of Gacy's victims, Robert Peist, was reported missing, police learned that Gacy was the last person known to have seen him. After obtaining a search warrant, police discovered the bodies of 29 boys and young men in or near Gacy's house, usually in the goddamn crawl space.
Mhm.
Four other bodies were found in the nearby Des Plaines River. Indeed, the area of the house had emanated a foul stench for years because bodies. Um, but Gacy had told his house guests and his wife, y'all, this guy was married,
Mhm.
that the smell was the result of a moisture buildup. Okay, moisture buildup and the smell of rotting flesh is two different things.
Mhm. That's
I don't,
true.
I don't. Okay, at his trial, Gacy's plea of innocent Oh God, by reason of insanity. Are you for real?
Hmm.
This guy, I'm so happy he's dead. Anyways, um, was supported by the testimony of several psychologists who diagnosed him as a schizophrenic, but then was rejected by the jury, which found him guilty of all 33 murders, of which he was um accused. He was then executed by lethal injection in 1994. Yep,
Hmm.
as we know. I think this is my final one. And this is kind of, because we kind of went all through the 70s here. We're going to be
Mhm.
talking about Richard Ramirez, which is the Night Stalker, or he is one of the Night Stalkers. The Golden State Killer is actually known as the Night Stalker as well. Um, so just we know that part. But this guy was actually operating more in the 80s in California, but like early 80s. So we'll end it off with him. Richard Ramirez, who was born on February 29th, 1960 in El Paso, Texas, and then later died on June 7th, 2013, was an American serial killer, rapist, and burglar who murdered at least 13 people in California in 1984 to 85. He was convicted and sentenced to death, but died while in prison. He had cancer.
Mhm.
Ramirez grew up in El Paso, Texas, the youngest of five children born to Mexican immigrants. According to reports, when he was 12 years old, a cousin who was a Vietnam War veteran showed him pictures of Vietnamese women he had allegedly raped, tortured, and killed. Fantastic. Sounds like a right thing to do.
Yeah.
The following year, Ramirez was a witness to his cousin's fatal shooting of his wife. So was this the same cousin? I'm going to assume it's the same cousin. But anyways,
Mhm.
around this time, Ramirez began breaking into homes. After dropping out of high school, he moved to Los Angeles. He continued to commit crimes and was briefly imprisoned for stealing a car. In June 1984, Ramirez committed his first known murder, raping and stabbing a 79-year-old widow. In 2009, he was implicated in the April 1984 murder of a 9-year-old girl after his DNA was determined to be at the crime scene. However, was not charged with the crime. He then apparently waited some 8 months before resuming his killings. Most of the deaths occurred in the Los Angeles area and took place during home invasions. Ramirez's victims, some of whom survived, were often sexually assaulted and beaten, and satanic symbols were found at many of the crime scenes. So he's a proud Satanist, by the way. The Night Stalker, as the killer became known, created a panic that saw a surge in gun sales. Eventually, a fingerprint was discovered that led to Ramirez's identification. On August 30th, 1985, 6 days after his last known murder, Ramirez's name and photograph were released to the public. And the following day, this is amazing. A man in East Los Angeles saw him and notified police. A chase then ensued, and as Ramirez tried to steal a car, he was surrounded by a crowd and beaten until police arrived. I mean, I think that's incredible. It's one
Yeah,
of my
it is.
favorite like captures of a serial killer.
Hmm.
Um, a self-described Satanist, as I just mentioned, Ramirez made various references to Satan during his legal proceedings. He notably drew a pentagram on his palm. His trial began in early 1989, and in September, he was convicted of 13 murders and a variety of other crimes. Nearly 2 months later, he was sentenced to death, with the judge stating that his crimes showed, quote, cruelty, callousness, and viciousness beyond any human understanding. Ramirez never expressed remorse, and after receiving his sentence, he stated, quote, big deal. Death always went with the territory.
Mm.
Gross. He was believed to have committed other murders and rapes, but was never charged for any additional crimes. While on death row at San Quentin State Prison, Ramirez was diagnosed with cancer. Oh, poor thing. Evil tends to get that. Anyways, he died in 2013. Rest in
Mm.
hell, you piece of shit.
Hmm.
Um, that's the end of the episode. We probably will be touching on Ramirez again in the future with a future
Right.
episode that we'll be doing. Um, so I believe we will be talking about the psychology of people who, um, like literally fall in love with serial killers.
Right.
Ramirez was one of those serial killers where women just loved him.
Mhm.
They thought he was beautiful, which I'll never understand because, I mean, with his mouth closed, I guess I can see it. Uh, I mean, I can't, but I
Mhm.
guess I could see it. But like, his teeth were rotting. His teeth were
Wow.
rotting. They literally called him smelly chops because he stunk. Like
Wow.
he's not appealing. Um, but for whatever reason, women loved him. So we'll be talking about that in a future episode.
Okay.
But
All
that's it
right.
for me.
All right. Okay. So this ends episode 126 of the Next Tape Podcast. The Next Tape Podcast is available on all podcast platforms. We also have a website called Tanika,
Nextdaypodcast.podpage.io,
and where else?
Facebook and Instagram at Next Take Podcast, and Twitter, TikTok, and Blue Sky at Next Take Pod.
And you can contact us on our email at mikeltanika@gmail.com. That's mikeltanika@gmail.com. So we talked about crime in the 1970s.
1970s, serial killers in the
Yeah.
70s. And trust me,
Yeah.
that's the tip of the iceberg.
Hmm.
There's
Yeah.
so many more
A
that we
lot,
don't even talk
a
about.
lot of, lot of stories, a lot of crime stories in
hmm
the
The
70s.
Hillside Stranglers, for example, that
Mm-hmm.
was in the 70s. That was two of
Mm,
them. So,
true, true.
yeah, there's a lot more that we didn't
All
talk
right.
about.
All right. All right. So that's it.
hmm
So I'm Mikal, and
And I'm Tanika.
we'll be back until
Next week.
next week.
hmm
All right. Peace, guys.
Bye.